Welcome to the Marvel Snap Deck Doctor series premiere. The series where I choose one card in Marvel Snap and teach you everything you need to know about building around that card and teach you about my process for building top meta contending decks. This week we're covering Maverick because he was recently in Snap Packs, and a lot of players are probably wondering, how do I build top Maverick decks? And that's what I'm here for. I'll teach you how to build your own top contending Maverick deck. So for the next 10 minutes, I will be doing an uncut talk-through on how I build Maverick and what decisions I'm making as I build a Maverick deck. To begin, obviously, we need to add Maverick to the deck, so we will be doing that. With Maverick in the deck, I will give you guys a moment to look at his ability. His ability is, give the next card you play power equal to this card's power. What question is this card asking of us? It is asking us to play cards that want to get that buff and have very, very good benefit when it gets that buff. So I will start there. To start there, I'm thinking Brood. I'm a Silver Surfer fan. Obviously, I'm a bit partial to Brood, but Brood doing a ×3 on Maverick is a lot of the time enough to win a game. With Brood in mind, I want a secondary target for this, and I don't want to create the same old Silver Surfer deck. So as a rule, I'm not going to put Silver Surfer in this deck. So where am I going to go from here? Well, I want to play a Galactus game plan, because that's a bit spicy, and a Galactus with a very big buff is a very interesting way to build a deck around. I will say this is not the best possible Maverick deck, but I'm teaching you guys how to build any Maverick deck. So using Galactus is a way to force us to teach you the ins and outs of a Maverick deck from a perspective that a top meta deck wouldn't necessarily take, while still maintaining it being competitive. So with Brood and Maverick and Galactus in mind, we have to answer the second question for Maverick. What does Maverick ask of us? It asks us to get him bigger. How do we make Maverick bigger? The most common way to make Maverick bigger is to add an Agony. Agony automatically gives +3 to Maverick, which is a very, very good thing for this deck. So right now, we have Galactus and Brood, both huge effects that are very good with Maverick as well as an Agony. Where do we go from here? Well, I think the most interesting way to go from here is, oh, I really want a big Galactus. What are multiple ways to make my Maverick very big so I can go all in on Galactus? Well, I think a very, very interesting way to do this is to go between the cross-section of Captain Carter, because we already have the Agony, meaning our Captain Carter is going to be very huge, as well as Captain Carter makes Maverick bigger, so it's a double force multiplier, which is a very interesting direction to go. With that in mind, where can we go next? Well, I think Jocasta is another way to get our Mavericks to be disproportionately large, allowing us to Galactus a lane and end up winning that lane. So from here, we have a lot of the 3 drops we already have to play. We have the Galactus, we have to invest a bit in our lower curve, and we can also add a few more 3 costs that very much help our Brood Galactus game plan. Where do I want to go from here? Well, immediately, like what comes to mind is, this deck has a severe weakness to Deafening Chord, which is really popular, meaning we basically have to play Cosmo to get off this combo, and I've played decks like this already. Playing Cosmo with the Maverick game plan is often still enough to win both the Cosmo lane as well as winning the second lane, whether it's a Brood or in this case a Galactus. From here, my mind instantly goes to, we really need low curve, but I want to build out the top curve a bit more. We're playing the Jocasta game plan, so how can I do both of those things? Well, I think Herbie's an interesting direction to get Galactus early, but not only get Galactus early, I think it's just an interesting direction to be able to fill a lane for our Captain Carter, as well as have a doubling option. Herbie gives us a lot of play, and I want this deck to be a single lane deck. When we're looking at the cards, we see a lot of single lane play. Captain Carter, Cosmo, Galactus incentivizes us to only play in a single lane early on. Since we have so many single lane cards, we can't afford to play an Awesome Andy, so we are playing a Herbie instead, which is a good activate target for Jocasta. Typically, these decks would play Awesome Andy, but our game plan does not allow for that, so I will be not playing Awesome Andy. I'll be playing Herbie, who also gets some bonus value from Agony. And you can already see how this deck is very much coming together with the various decisions that I'm making. Moving on, we still need low curve. I will just look at the activates because I naturally am incentivized to play activates with Jocasta. What activates can I think about here? Are any of them good? I'm going to be honest, none of them are really good. You can play Awesome Andy here. I'm not a super fan of Awesome Andy. I will be going into a different direction. A lot of the time when I'm going into a different direction, what I'll do is just go through the two drops and see what looks and stands out to me. Does any of these stand out with the Galactus game plan? I think Surge can be a very solid option just to smooth out our curve and potentially get a bit bigger. I'll put Surge in there for now, but I won't necessarily commit to Surge. What's another interesting game plan? I think honestly a Forge is a very solid game plan here, and my gut is telling me let's make it a Forge deck. We can Forge Galactus, gets us a bit bigger, but Captain Carter and Maverick are also very solid Forge targets. So I think that will be able to be an interesting angle we can go. This is not necessarily the most optimal deck. I would probably go through the two drops a bit more if I was actually making this deck to be meta viable. Not meta viable, but to be viable within like a large sample size and be one of the best decks in the game. I would probably not even go in the Galactus direction. But this is definitely an interesting direction to go into, and I think we can be incentivized to play into this direction. So how do we make our Galactus window a bit bigger? I think immediately we want an Omega Sentinel. It allows us to put power effectively into the Galactus lane without committing to only putting power into that Galactus lane, and it works with a Jocasta combo. And you can very much see how the deck is coming together. We need to make a few final options. I think the bouncing of the Prodigy is a very good game plan, because what you can do with Prodigy is effectively just bounce your Prodigy. You can bounce your Maverick buff, so you play Maverick, you play a card in between, and then you Prodigy. That's one way to get two Mavericks. You can also Prodigy the Jocasta, you can Prodigy the Captain Carter. There's a ton of interesting Prodigy directions here. And now I'm looking at the deck in its entirety. I'm saying maybe Forge has to go away, and looking at this deck and saying, oh, that seems pretty solid. It seems like a pretty solid game plan. How can I build out the rest of this deck to be something that I would be happy to play? So the question here very much is, how do I support my Galactus and my Brood game plan without playing Silver Surfer, despite me really wanting to play Silver Surfer in a deck like this? So what are the answers I will be considering here is the real question. I think the answer I have to consider here is, do I really care about getting my Galactus out early? Probably not. It's probably a last turn Galactus game plan. Meaning, how do I get the Prodigy to get as much value as possible? I think this is already solid. I think we need another 3-drop and another 2-drop. Ideally, we need something that won't take space, and I immediately see Majestic Windbeat pop up on my screen, and I think that's a very solid option, and it is an option that will give us a lot of buff targets as well as just the Galactus target. Hitting a Maverick, very good. Hitting a Galactus, very solid. Hitting anything else, pretty solid. There's not a lot of power on these cards. A 1-2 is not fine, but I don't think it's amazing. But something like a Brood, a Captain Carter, those are bigger numbers, as well as a Maverick and effectively a Prodigy. There's a ton of targets that actually want this Majestic Windbeat, so I think it's enough to justify it. What else can we consider here? I'm not in love with a Majestic Windbeat, but I think it is our best option here. We could also consider maybe a Kitty Pryde, but playing Kitty Pryde on the last turn is not very viable here, so it's not something I'm actually in love with. Moving on, I will just be going through the low curve and trying to figure out and grind out which low curve I want, which often is a problem with the decks I make. I'm able to make the combo on the top end, but the bottom end gets a bit difficult until I'm able to finally find something that I'm really happy with. So moving through the bottom end, there's not anything that is tremendously good here, but there is a bunch of solid options. And I think, honestly, what you want to play here is something that could just justify playing the Galactus game plan that already fits in your other game plan. You could do something creative like a Kid Omega Wolverine is something that could be very viable here. Kid Omega would get very big, Wolverine would get very big. It's kind of a interesting combo, and honestly, Wolverine works with Galactus, Kid Omega is interesting enough. Is there a way to justify the Kid Omega in any other way other than the Wolverine? Not necessarily. So I'm not in love with that either, so I won't be going in that direction. This is a very interesting question, and I think it actually comes down to preference, and I don't think there's like a very solid option here. And I'm very much, to be honest, struggling with the last two cards in this list, which is normal for you guys, and I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of you guys struggle to put the last few cards in in your list as well. And I just want to tell you that's completely normal. I think our decision actually has to be Forge. And then we'll look either at a 3 cost, see if something can force multiply a bit more. And if we can't get a bit more force multiplication on that end, I think it is just a majestic wind beat to fill out our curve. We're looking at the 3 drops. Instantly, nothing is popping into my mind or I'm seeing on the board. Maybe I'd like a Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer doesn't naturally fit in this game plan, however. And now that I'm thinking about it, I actually want a 1 drop that I can play with power, so I will put a Chavez in here because it allows me to play it on the board, but Chavez also just gives us a bit more bulk and potentially makes our Galactus and stuff bigger. So with that, that's my walkthrough of how I build Maverick, and let's walk through my exact process one last time so you guys can maybe understand my logic a bit better. So we began with Maverick and we asked ourselves, what exactly do we want to put inside our Maverick deck? First of all, what are our buff targets? Because Maverick wants buff targets. I said Brood and Galactus, there are 2 very big buff targets that can win you a game by themselves because they can win lanes by themselves. And then from Maverick, we asked, what are the multiple ways to get a very big Maverick? We can go all in on Jocasta, and we can go all in on Captain Carter. From there, we bridged into Prodigy, very good with the Captain Carter and Jocasta. So let's play inside of that game plan. And Prodigy is also solid into Maverick. We played a bit around tech cards, specifically Deafening Chord with Cosmo. And then we basically built the rest of our deck to support that Galactus Brood game plan, playing some buff cards here and there, as well as playing some activate cards to really round out our game plan. And that was more than enough to create what, in my opinion, looks like a fun meta-viable deck. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out the video that is popping up on your screen right now. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Peace out. See you guys in the next video.